Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's announcement. My name is Sherry Williams, and I am the Executive Director of Operations at Technology Access Foundation, or TAF. TAF is a nonprofit leader in science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM education. We use STEM as a tool for realizing social change and education equality in communities of color and underserved. In our 20-plus year history, we have impacted over 19,000 students, resulting in a 90% on-time high school graduation rate and a 100% college acceptance rate. I think it's apparent we have an important stake in ensuring the City of Seattle has a Chief Technology Officer that has a passion for creating technology access and equity across all Seattle's diverse communities. Thank you, Mayor Durkan, for allowing me to serve as co-chair. My counterpart, co-chair, Michael Schutzler, CEO of Washington Technology Industry Association, could not attend today, but shares my excitement about today's announcement. Along with me and Michael, our search committee consisted of leaders from Nordstrom's, Microsoft, Socrata, Amazon, Expedia, IBEW, Local 77, and the city, many of whom are here today. I want to acknowledge their dedication, applying their expert knowledge as we examine applicants to help find Seattle's next CTO. Mayor Durkan, thank you for pulling together this talented group of individuals. I'd like to share a little bit about the process to find the City of Seattle CTO. More than 228 candidates applied for this position, and 10 were invited to interview with the committee. We met with employee groups of the IT department, including the Race and Social Justice Initiative and union members, to find out what values they looked for in a leader. We strongly believe that Mayor Durkan's choice has what it takes to motivate and innovate the department for years to come. And with that said, I'd like to introduce Mayor Jenny Durkan, who will announce her choice for Chief Technology Officer of Seattle IT. And at the risk of stealing her thunder, I want to say that I think she has found an exceptional leader and made a great choice. Thank you.
You can steal my thunder anytime. First, welcome. Thank you so much. Heather, do you want to come join us up here?
Standing in for Michael.
That's right, standing in for Michael. I want to thank everyone for being here this morning and for folks who are watching it. First, before we talk about the CTO, I want to say something about the federal government shutdown. This Trump shutdown is now in its 32nd day, more than a month. When I served as U.S. Attorney, I was forced to shut our office down on 2 occasions and saw firsthand the really big impacts that had on the families of the people who worked in the federal government and the families of the people who are served day in, day out by the federal government. This shutdown has hurt federal employees across our country and continues to threaten our most vulnerable neighbors and the services they rely on. Every day that the crisis of the government shutdown continues, public servants in Seattle are forced to live without knowing if they can provide for their families. And Seattle is put at risk by the lack of federal services that we rely on, from earthquake monitoring to the Coast Guard to affordable housing support. Federal workers will get their second paycheck with no money in it. Think about that. Every 2 weeks, every American almost relies on getting a paycheck. And studies have shown, and we looked at this carefully when I was working in the federal government, that most federal workers could go without 1 paycheck, but not all. But that most federal workers definitely could not go without 2 paychecks. Here in Seattle, it is hitting the people of Seattle. Federal grants to homeless service providers are drying up. Our federal housing vouchers are no longer available as they would have been. The Federal Transit Administration, which is overseeing a number of the transit grants that we want, from everything from the streetcar to the rapid ride bus on Madison, they are not working. And just today, Alaska Airlines announced that its service from Payne Field would be delayed because the federal government could not process the paperwork needed to begin that service. There's approximately 11,000 federal employees in Washington state who are either working without pay or have been furloughed. This morning, I issued an executive order to help those impacted federal employees that live in the city of Seattle to deal with their utility payments. Under the executive order, Seattle City Light, Seattle Public Utilities, the Seattle Budget Office, and the Human Services Department are directed to immediately develop a plan to allow federal workers to defer utility bill payments until they get pay. We're also looking at other actions we can take as a city government to help those people who are working to provide services to our community without pay, who are home not providing those vital services and not collecting pay. We've all seen the stories of federal workers who are now applying for food stamps, second jobs, third jobs. Let them go back to work. Let them go back to work. We will continue to act urgently in the city of Seattle to help those families who've been hurt by the Trump shutdown and make sure that we can do what we can to provide that. So now back to the search process and the search that resulted in why we're here today. Over the past year, my office has conducted an extensive international search for the next permanent CTO of the Seattle IT department. For decades, our city has been the home to some of the most innovative technological companies anywhere in the world. Our technology companies literally create the environment and invent the future. We were the birthplace of personal computing, online travel planning, cloud technology, not to mention a number of other innovations. Developing these world-class technologies takes world-class talent, making Seattle a magnet for some of the most skilled technologists, developers, and engineers in the world. That's why it was so critical for the city to identify an individual who brings a good balance of private and public sector experience to be the next CTO of the Seattle IT department. We need somebody who is at the equal of the innovation that we see in this city daily. Seattle, the city, cannot lag behind Seattle, the innovator. Our IT department is critical for the day-to-day functioning of our city, maintaining not just the technology infrastructure, but also managing cybersecurity, data transparency, and really important, digital equity. It is responsible for maintaining a huge amount of physical and digital infrastructure that is critical to the City of Seattle's mission of delivering services to our residents and businesses. I am so excited today to announce that Saad Bashir is Seattle's next CTO. After an extensive international search process, which I'm excited was one of the best we've had, and is best situated now to support him in his work. Saad, thank you for taking this. As our Chief Information Officer for the City of Ottawa, Saad led a team of over 350 IT professionals to deliver cost-effective and innovative solutions for a user base of over 19,000 individuals. He also managed a budget of over $100 million that encompassed addressing technology modernization, network operations, enterprise applications, project management, cybersecurity, risk architecture, and the overall strategy. Before taking that role of CIO in Ottawa, Bashir gained a variety of experiences in both the public and private sectors, including serving as the City of Ottawa's Director of Economic Development. It's one reason I really like Saad so much is before he became the head of IT, he was one of the largest customers of IT. And he brought with him that ethos to say, how do we make sure that every line of business a city has is served to do that business better by the technology infrastructure we build for them. As one of the fastest changing industries, it is crucial to have a leader in our IT department that will ensure that our city keeps up with new developments and innovations. I believe Saad is that leader. Saad understands that information technology is not just about communications. It is an essential pathway to equity and an essential pathway to every service that the customers of Seattle demand. Under his leadership in Ottawa, they transformed their IT department into a trailblazing public sector IT department by streamlining processes, increasing productivity, and enhancing agility. His commitment to training and empowering existing talent was also something that was very important to me. In looking at his references and talking to people I've worked for, Saad is a person who is a team player, who will lift up not just his department, but work with every other city department to ask, how can we do better? How can we serve the people of Seattle better? He is a proven technology leader, and I'm excited to work with him as he takes us to the next level. I really want to thank one of the people who got us here. One reason that we are so well positioned to have Saad lead this is because not just the search committee who I'm at, but Tracy, who acted for the last year to keep things moving. Also, Michael Mattmiller, who was the previous IT director, did enormous things to change the culture of the city and to really modernize and look forward on what we needed to do. But when we set out to find a new leader, it was in a really difficult atmosphere because you may have noticed there's a lot of people trying to hire the best and brightest of technology and innovation here in Seattle. And we had to compete with those. I want to thank the co-chairs, Michael Schutzler, who's not here, and Heather Redmond, who has helped us on so many fronts, who's stepping in for him. Sherry Williams, thank you for everything you did for this, but also everything you do with TAF for equity in our community. Marcus Kirsch from Expedia, who helped us as well. I know that in order for us to move ahead, we have to have the most dynamic leaders in all our departments. And I think today I can't say enough about Saad being here. I'll have some additional cabinet appointments that we announced today, but before I do that, I want to give time for Saad to talk so you can meet him. And truly, this is a huge step for the city of Seattle. We now have a leader who is equivalent to any leader in any company, in any innovation sphere in Seattle today. So Saad, welcome.
It's always hard to follow an eloquent mayor like yourself, but I'm going to try. And I'm not good at following my own notes, so I may go off track as well a little bit. But good morning, everybody, and I'm thrilled to be here. Mayor Durkan and Team Seattle, thank you for the opportunity. In fact, this morning I felt 10 years young. But because of the excitement that I feel, however, someone close to me said that just give yourself a couple of months in the job and you'll come to your senses. And part of the reason that I'm so keen in this role is the significant change opportunity it represents. And I'm going to list 6, not 5, not 7, but 6 aspects of the change opportunity that I'm looking forward to tackle. 1, municipalities and particularly large urban centers like Seattle are getting into the technology management business. No longer are we taking a piece of tech and enabling a business solution. We are talking about reimagining how we run our operations, deliver our services, engage with our citizens. And all that means that we have to be extremely nimble in our approach. And that is something which will be foundational for whatever Seattle IT can offer. Speaking of what we should not offer is red tape. And often, it's not something that we want. But sometimes over time, people and processes can get in the way. And it reminds me, this morning I reminded myself of a recent episode where we brought an armchair to the house, and I got busy as soon as we entered, and I left it at the entrance. And my wife would say that I was just being plain lazy. But I had other important things to do. And although my family was able to figure out a way to maneuver around and over the armchair to get to the main door and the front closet, I did cause an avoidable inconvenience. So you can expect that as the new CTO, I'm going to question and simplify every internal IT process, policy structure that we have in place, just for the simple reason of making sure that we are not standing in the way of business. Resetting processes and people is one thing, but if we just stop there, in my opinion, that's job half done. And so changing the culture and making it one where continuous self-checks are part of your daily routine is going to be really the end goal and the third thing that's going to keep me busy. And as you can appreciate, as the mayor may appreciate, changing culture is a long-term thing. But once it gets going, from my experience at the City of Ottawa, it can be a bit unstoppable. And so that is something that I'm looking forward to do as well. Throughout the interview process and every time I've spoken with people from the city, it's become abundantly clear that the city of Seattle's success is directly tied to diversity, inclusiveness, social justice. And you know, on this front, I feel at home because Canada, as you may know, tries to lead on some of these fronts. I've been able to support some of this work with my participation at the board level with Oxfam Canada. And it's going to be quite energizing to be able to do these types of, practice these values on a daily basis at work. In the past, and specifically in this role, my success, individual success, is going to be directly connected with the success of the IT team. And so one of the top things that I'm going to be doing immediately is making sure that the IT colleagues are going to be front and center of whatever technology modernization efforts we undertake. And from experience, the fastest way to re-engage your team, the fastest way to get them excited is to provide them the skills and the freedom to lead. You know, it's also the easiest way to get lots of heartburns because as I have experienced in Ottawa, you know, behind the scenes it's not always pretty, but really, you know, minimizing future people liability for the city of Seattle is going to be a key concern of mine. And that will be item number 5. And lastly, you know, something which is very unique to Seattle is that you are a tech-focused town. And when you are living in this city, citizens of Seattle probably expect a similar digital experience that they have come to expect when they deal, you know, when they consume a service from the private sector. And for me, that is a great challenge to have because that is going to make sure that we're always on our technology toes. You know, it's also going to allow us to do some really creative partnerships. From back in Ottawa, we were able to strike partnerships with companies in Seattle. You know, I can just see that type of work, you know, really happening on a much bigger scale in this particular role. So partnerships, not transactional relationships with vendors, is something that I would be shooting for. My commitment to you, Mayor Durkan, City Council, and this organization is that if I'm confirmed, that we are going to strive to have a best-in-class IT team and nothing short of that. And that means that we are going to, what we invest, how we invest, our people, our processes, our approach, we're going to be setting best practices for others to follow. And just before you hit the exit music, there have been a few people instrumental in helping me with this transition, and I'm still going through the transition. I was nervous to say City of Ottawa, which I just did, versus City of Seattle in my remarks. But Deputy Mayor David Mosley, you know, Terry, Pam, Nina, Tracy, Rachel, Marissa, Mayor Durkan, yourself, and I'm sure I've forgotten a few names, but you have been great ambassadors of Seattle. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. So we'll take a few questions on that. I also want to make sure there was an announcement today that tomorrow we'll also be submitting a nomination, the reappointment of Robert Nellums as the head of Seattle Center. As you know, he threatened to retire earlier. We dissuaded him. And he is so tied to the center and the future of success at the center, getting through not just the arena, but reimagining what that center is going to be. So I'm enormously grateful that he's agreed to stay on. We also will have Bobby Humes will serve as the interim director for the Seattle Department of Human Resources. He currently is the HR director at Seattle Parks and Recreation. He's a very experienced person in workforce development, labor relations, and diversity and inclusion. We were able to spend a fair amount of time together in the last several weeks, and I think that he's going to be a perfect fit for that interim role in continuing to move Seattle HR forward. Yeah, sure. It's Humes. First name goes by Bobby, but I think it's officially Robert. Mr. Robert. And I know with cabinet members like Saad, Robert Nellums, and Bobby, we will continue to expand the opportunity for the people of Seattle, not just in building that city of the future, but making sure that we continue to deliver the basic city services. Thanking for each of them. And now, if there's any questions for me or for Saad.
Apologies, on the executive order,
Yes.
you mentioned some other things you were exploring. Can you talk about that?
You know, we have to look at the range of, first of all, what's impacted and what things we might be able to do. And so we've pulled in Human Services Division, all of the utilities and others to look at whether there's other things short-term that we can provide, including up to whether there's any temporary employment positions that might be open to people with expertise in the federal government that we could fill real quickly and have them serve the people of Seattle and actually get paid.
Is there anything you can do around Section 8 or housing?
We're looking at that. It's a little more complicated, and so we are consulting with the Seattle Housing Authority on that as well. As you know, those monies flow very strictly through the HUD programs. So it is unclear whether we can do that. We are going to look at whether there's a way to backfill, which is more difficult, obviously, because of how the city budget monies can be used. But I've told people to get creative. You know, who knows how long this will be going, but if it could last another month, this could be devastating to families, absolutely devastating. And we in the city need to be ready to see what we can do both to help those families and to advance the interests of the city of Seattle.
And will the deferral on utility bills, will that be any sort of significant hit to the utility departments? Is that
It should not be, no. And as you know, the president already signed a bill saying once they do open it up, everyone gets back pay. And so people's ability to pay those kinds of things should not be questioned. But literally, people live paycheck to paycheck. And federal workers are right now reporting for duty, doing their job, and not getting paid. If that's not un-American, I don't know what is. And then there's other families. You know, when I worked for the U.S. Attorney's Office, people think of the lawyers. But there are assistants, janitors, clerks. Many of those people work on contracts. Those contracts are not getting paid, and those people will not get back pay. So this is probably, as all economic incidents are, hardest on the people who can afford it the least. And we as a city want to do our part to at least try to address that and help people through this very difficult time.
Do you have a sense of how many people might qualify for those discounts from City Light and SPU?
We've got the discount program already, which is assessed, but we have no idea which of those federal workers who are City Light or utilities customers. And so we're setting the process up right now. We know that of the several thousand live in Washington State, a disproportionate amount actually live in the Seattle area. But each one of them is going to be different. As you know, some of the federal government have a very small number have continued to be paid because they rely on independent funds that the agencies that are shut down get. But I think it's hundreds of people who literally don't know how they're going to pay their bills. And we in the city want to do our part to say, look, we will help you and waive these fees. We'll work with you and your families.
Last question.
I was just going to ask, what are some of the most important projects or issues facing the IT department at this moment?
That's a great question, and I'll let Saad address this too, but kind of background of that. So there's no project right now that isn't of significance, and we've seen some of those projects roll out not as successfully as we'd like, whether it's the metering project at City Light or the permitting project at our permitting department. And so we are revamping almost department by department how we do business and interface with the public. And these projects are very difficult. When I was U.S. Attorney, I had the opportunity to work with a person who was probably one of the smartest, best leaders I've ever known, whose name was Bob Mueller. And Bob Mueller ran that FBI like nobody's business. But if you look at history, the one project that got the better of Bob Mueller was his IT innovation project. went over budget, over budget, over budget, and they finally had to, I think, start all over by hundreds of millions. So we know that these projects can tend to escalate. So it's why Saad is going to be really important to really sit down with the department ahead of time and say, what is it we're trying to do? What is the business need you have? Rather than just buy whatever someone sells you off the shelf and add all these bells and whistles that are never meant to work together. So literally, department by department right now, we are innovating and redoing how we connect with the public, everything from the website to the fundamental ways that we read electricity. But Saad, you've had a chance to look at some of these issues.
You know, this time next week I can list you all the IT projects that we have going on in Seattle. But you know, through the interview process, there were a number of them that were talked about. One of them was records management. You know, one thing that is quite similar to Ottawa is that, as to Mayor's point, every project, every initiative of every department at the City of Seattle, I can bet you has a major technology component to it. And so one of the things that I am hoping to do in the very early few weeks is to go on a bit of a listening and learning spree, exactly what I did back in Ottawa, to make sure I collect as many perspectives, both from all levels in IT and our clients. You know, one of the things that I can foresee us doing is simplifying a lot of our processes in terms of how we engage with our user groups. Often, you know, it's an example I used to use in my previous role. We ask somebody who has a headache versus somebody who needs a heart surgery the same level of questioning when you're in IT. And so, you know, if we can simplify that engagement, I think we can start putting things through the pipeline much faster.
As I'm sure you're aware, a couple of years ago, there was an initiative to consolidate IT functions into one department, which you now lead. Have you had a chance to sort of consider or think about how that's been going and whether there would be changes to that consolidation?
Yeah, and I think you know, that is something that many cities around North America are wanting to do, which is to consolidate your technology footprint, because it can, the cost especially can go out of control. I think it works in theory, often these things, but when you start translating them into practical day-to-day, they can stumble a little bit. So, you know, some of the reading I've done, I think one of you belongs to Crosscut, and I think you were one of the people that I have taken this job because you articulated really well, you know, all of the things that could potentially be done or improved.
David, hello.
That was you, David. Thank you, David, for helping me with my interview. So, you know, and I suspect, you know, what I found back in Ottawa is that the perception sometimes is that nothing is going right. And I think more often than not, that's not true. I think if you start peeling some of the layers, you find that there's some great work happening. And one of the things that I want to do is become a bit of a chief thank you officer as well, you know. Thank all the folks in IT who have been doing a lot of good work, but sometimes it doesn't see the light of the day. So, so no, I think your article from, I think, a year ago, probably a lot of things still hold, and those are the things that I'm going to be working on as well.
Thank you very much.